counts. And even if we could wave a magic wand, currently the amount of available British organic food to supply this sector is a drop in the ocean. But things are changing fast. Yeah, that's great. I've been working with Pete Hemingway, and that's a quote that he put together for us. And I think the big change is, whether it be climate change, reducing waste, finding creative ways to up quality and use organic ingredients, or building local supply and use organic ingredients, or building local supply chains, which we've heard from Sophie. Sustainability, and I quote, now touches every aspect of hospitality and needs more airtime. The Sustainable Restaurant Association, by the way, already, and they don't major on organic food. They actually major on quite a lot of other things like waste and using, let's say, electricity and stuff. But already they've got 30% of their members buy organic dairy. They've got 30% of their members buy organic dairy, 20% organic fresh produce, 10 to 15% organic meat. There is a huge opportunity for organics to be at this table, to be able to begin to set the agenda. It's a long game, it's not going to happen overnight, but it is already happening. The Soil Association's Out to Lunch campaign is gaining ground. McDonald's do serve organic milk, organic coffee is normal. Jamie's doing his bit. As the saying goes, where there is a will, there is a way. Forgive me, Will, I couldn't resist it. And I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Will Pouget, who owns the Vaults and Garden Cafe in Oxford. He does have sustainability in his veins. He is one of the new generation grassroots cooks, embracing sustainability issues head on and serving a lot, who's passionate about serving all organic food and using his local suppliers. As it happens, and we didn't know this, but James eats at Will's restaurant, cafe, very frequently. So I'm actually, these two are going to do a bit of a double act. So over to James for this one.
Well, thanks, Lynda, very much.
Thank you, Lynda.
I think Steve, in a way, introduced some quite interesting stats on trends. And I suspect that there is no one here in this room who is eating out less now than they did 5 years ago. In fact, the trend, as we can see, is in absolutely the opposite direction. And when we're talking about access and engagement, we ignore that sector at our peril. And as Lynda has said, we need to understand and embrace it, and indeed address some of the barriers that are being put up to prevent the sector becoming more sustainable and indeed more organic. Now, as has been said, Will has got a fantastic outlet at the Vaults. It's on my favourites list because I'm very fortunate that I can walk to it and do so regularly. But actually the reason that I enjoy going to the Vaults is because the food is really tasty and it's very competitively priced and has a great atmosphere. So that's the reason that I go there. But Will, would you like to just tell us how the journey started and how you progressed to where you are now?
Thank you. Yeah, well, Oxford, we're very lucky in Oxford. It's a university town with students from all around the world and from all sorts of backgrounds. And so there's a big culture of eating out and meeting up for a coffee and having lunch. Our sort of niche has evolved to being sort of pilot high and sell it cheap organically. With a very simple menu. We have usually 3 to 4 main dishes on the lunch menu, and the breakfast menu is equally sort of streamlined. And that's the way we've coped with, rather than having a sort of extensive menu, which is very difficult to maintain with lots of different ingredients. Asparagus on the menu when it goes out, and we've actually taken fresh tomatoes off the menu about a couple of weeks ago because it's more expensive, and we're forcing our customers to choose other options. So our customers have to go with a smaller menu, but they then it's more affordable. It's delicious, it's properly seasoned, which makes it easier for the chefs to juggle, juggling too many different dishes. And it has been a real challenge. I have to admit, it's been a huge challenge. getting food that's tasty, that's organic and in season, locally sourced, at the right price and in the right quantities to satisfy hungry rowers and lacrosse players and hungover students on a Sunday morning. And for a few years we sort of traded very successfully in terms of popularity and having the restaurant packed. But in terms of profitability, it was looking pretty slim. I didn't go on holiday for about 6 years. But gradually over time, we've sort of eked out our sort of sustainable, in terms of economics, sustainably profitable formula, which works. And the way we've done that is in sort of many ways, but one of the key things is food wastage. So food wastage in catering is sort of routinely very high. There's lots of actually initiatives in Oxford which have started off picking up leftover food and giving it to the homeless, and there's a food bank actually in Oxford, the Oxford Food Bank, which helps to distribute waste food to charities and homeless shelters, etc. But we've developed our own internal system to minimise food wastage, which starts off with chopping a carrot, not chopping a sort of a centimetre of the edge off, really just taking off what you need. And we stock all our trimmings from, most of our trimmings, not great cabbage, but a lot of our trimmings and bones from the meat is all stocked to get the maximum flavour from. And the food wastage sort of control aspect happens on every single level, from portioning to having too many scones baked off at the end of the day, and putting out special bargain discounts through either social media or through, we have a routine actually that a lot of our food is discounted to 20% off to 2.30, and lots of different tricks that we've employed to bring down food wastage, and that has allowed us to maintain a good profitability. There's various other aspects to ensure that productivity of the team is very high, and to give them an awareness that we're using sustainable ingredients. So we do a lot of farm trips.
And you've got your food waste down to something ridiculously low in terms of...
I calculate it to be no more than 3%.
And it's usually what in your industry?
I would say it's at least 10 to 20%. Depends on... So we're a canteen, which has dishes coming out. So we'll have like a batch of, let's say, lasagna, which is a 12-portion dish, and we just serve it up like in a canteen, which means you can have more food wastage than you can have with a short order menu, where you order your lunch and it comes out from table service. That's easier to control food waste in some respects, but we basically are busy enough that we can manage we worked out a good system with our till system as well, using modern technology to try and predict how many portions we sell between 12 and 1 o'clock, etc. But you do have days where for some reason no one's coming in.
Well, you're in as you said, I think one of the very interesting things is that Will is in an extremely competitive environment. There are multiple outlets surrounding the vaults. Many chains that the Costas and the Starbucks are around. There are also many independents around as well. So he's in an extremely competitive marketplace, and I'm wondering how you have remained competitive, and how also that you're very open and honest about your organic, sustainable offering. There's probably a perception that it may be more expensive than the competition, possibly. There's a perception, and yet you seem to continue to bring in the customers, although there is a significant competition around you. How have you addressed that?
Well, it's a real challenge to try and articulate our story and what is unique about the way we operate, and our ethos and our values and where we source our food from. I mean, I've sort of been championing it myself. I'm telling everyone personally, as much as possible, and training the team about where ingredients come from. And we have regular trips for a lot of our management staff to the farm. We go and have lunch there, and so that they're really sort of infused with the whole ethos of what we're doing, to try and communicate that to customers. But I'm always, it's really important to use social media, to take photographs, to use things like Instagram, which I'm not very good at using, but I have a team who are very, very good at it. And we're now starting to make lots of little videos about where we get our produce from, because I think it's really important to communicate. I feel that we are pioneering local food in Oxford, and a lot of people are copying what we're doing, which is great. It's actually it's great they're doing it. But a lot of people sort of water it down in terms of actually the ingredients they use, and people feel that it has an organic atmosphere, but actually they're just getting everything from Great Brothers or whoever. So I think telling that story is really, really important, and I'm so passionate about it that and I enjoy telling that story to all our customers that I've been doing it. But I'm trying to sort of pull back a little bit from the front line of service after sort of 20 years of doing it, and get my team now to empower them, inspire them to tell that story further. But we're very lucky in Oxford because Oxford's kind of it does work through certain cliques, and so for example there's various societies, and there's various societies in Oxford which deal with sustainable food, and we've hosted lots of their dinners and lots of events that we've catered for, which, I mean, for example, we hosted the first, the Real Farming Conference, which is in Oxford, now become a huge thing. And because we've hosted that on a regular basis, people realise that we're very much involved in the organic food and sustainable food movement in Oxford. And the more that people take the time to learn about us, they discover that there's lots of deeper layers to what we do.
Can I move you on to a slightly wider agenda briefly? At a recent consultative event, as part of the English Organic Action Plan process, Pete Hemingway, whose quote is up there on the board, was asked about how restaurants who are members of his association have been embracing organic food, and he was quite pessimistic about it, saying that the sort of significant response that was coming back from restaurants was that customers were essentially not prepared to pay the premium. They didn't see the value, essentially, or were unable to see the value, so that when restaurants did put essentially organic product on their menus and the prices went up, there was a definite consumer resistance to that. And so I'm just wondering if you've got a comment on your experience and how that might be better conveyed through organisations such as the Sustainable Restaurant Association, so that actually restaurateurs and others understand that moving to a higher quality food culture within that is not necessarily going to see a reduction in margin and so on.
Yeah, I think that they need to be committed to getting good quality ingredients and key products. For example, I mean, our scones are made with flour from Shipton Mill flour, and we use pasture-fed butter. And I think you can have a key product like that, which often people say, well, how much are your scones? And ours are made with homemade jam as well, and clotted cream is from Oxfordshire. So you can have these key products which I think people can refer to, and even though you're a bit more expensive, I think it's really important to communicate what's unique about those products and why they're different from the competition. But I think the Sustainable Restaurant Association and a lot of these organisations, I think organic is it's a crucial issue really, because you've got simple ingredients which define a menu, and to communicate that this carrot has come from this farm, or this is a heritage variety of potato, or this is a breed of a cow, where this has come from. And that's really, really important. How you articulate that on your menu is crucial, rather than it just being beef stroganoff or mushroom and chicken pie. To take a little bit of time to artistically embellish that and substantiate it as well, then that's really, really important.
That's great. Well, thank you. And with your background in food writing, perhaps that's something that there's an observation there, isn't there, about actually how we articulate, how restaurants actually articulate clearly the value that is in the food that they're serving.
Yeah, it's articulating, actually pressing the buttons that matter somehow engaging them. Did anybody listen to Holly, a farmer from Wales yesterday? And she was saying that if she when she takes people around their farm, it's exactly the same principle. If she tells people, well, I'm doing this because it saves bees, they get it. If she tells people that, well, if I'm doing this because you know what, we've got 20% more hares on our farm, they get it. If she then starts talking about the whole kind of complex mix that is organic or soil structure, they don't get it. And for me, part of the empowerment, which is why I'm so passionate about this particular section, is that when you find those keys, it does empower people. And all of a sudden, it takes them on a journey, which is as much about their own personal health and well-being as it is about the environments and as it is about what everybody here is doing. We've got 3 roundup slides, which again you really don't need to memorise. But if Joe would,
she'll test you. I tell you from personal experience, she'll test you on the way home.
Can't help it. Right. This is basically what we're asking for in public procurement in a nutshell. I won't go through them, you can skim them, we can come back to these things. Then we've got one on community, home and community food growing. And then the final one is on sustainable and organic catering. I think for this last one, honestly, the first job to do is to be at the table, to help set and be involved in the discussions around what sustainable catering is all about and how the organic sector can help develop that. And for me, one of the take-home messages of what we've heard this morning is I do feel it's grassroots solutions for everything we've been talking about today. And I think it is time, I'm really hoping that we can now get stuck in. Is there anybody who has any views, any comments? Is there anybody who would like to talk about public procurement, for example?
I have a question for Sophie about public procurement.
Yes, surely.
Could you say who you are and what
yes.
you represent an organisation?
I'm going to let James be Master of Ceremonies.
My name is Alison Butler. I currently work on a small veg farm called North Down Orchard in Hampshire.
Thank you.
I've spent 15 years working with children in schools and for Hackney Council in East London.
Thank you.
And I found with procurement that you're up against cost all the time. If you've got certain hooks, you can get things through, especially quality or, like you said about the gold food for life.
Yeah.
If they've got some kind of award or some kind of benchmark of quality. What other hooks do you think for growers to approach schools directly if you don't have something as brilliant as that fresh range thing?
Sophie, what's your observation on that?
I think that if you ever have opportunities to meet chefs, things like that, that's probably the best way in. But it really does depend on the procurement setup in that area. So for example, the Tower Hamlets and what Baines used to have was a catering service which was managed centrally by the council, and it's a lot more complex then to get into that kind of system. With academisation of schools, you're getting more and more schools going in-house, which actually provides, if you don't have this kind of dynamic food procurement setup, that actually provides a lot more opportunities for, say, a smaller veg grower like yourself to try and bridge those, form those relationships direct. What I would say is it would be about, actually kind of trying to approach local chefs, catering staff, trying to introduce yourself. A lot of local authority areas now have a kind of, they're involved in sustainable food cities, which is it's a kind of approach which the Soil Association are leading on along with other partners, and that's where you take a kind of city-wide approach or an area-wide approach to food, and they often might do things like hold meet the buyer events or at least know the contacts. You might be able to contact someone there who will then be able to introduce you to the right people. So I'd have a look. Do you say it's Hampshire where you are at the moment?
It is now, yeah, but still connected to London.
Steve, with your experience of school gardens, do you think that those initiatives can sometimes help with school in looking at its procurement of food?
Yeah, I think I think one area that you might be able to look at is variety as well. So if you can offer choice and variety that other people can't offer, being a small producer, you can pick your varieties, you can pick the types of vegetables that you grow and things like that, and then you can offer a different choice. So you can drive a niche in that respect. So it might be heritage, it might be other things. The other thing around the connection, there's a huge connection now within, although gardening's not on the curriculum, but the connection with children and where their food comes from. And part of the Food for Life programme, part of the programmes of Garden Organic work is about engaging children. So again, it's about, the children in the school becoming consumers, of them starting to say, in our school we would like to see this. And also, we also know that when you engage children at school, that then transpires back out into the parents. As a parent of two children, I know what goes on in school comes into our house as well. So it kind of drives it in a different way. So the school engagement aspect is really important from a food perspective, but also from an education perspective. And again, like I said in my speech, if we can talk to people about organic as early as possible and make it the norm, then that's a way to drive it forward. And there aren't any lost generations, but let's not lose the current new generation coming forward.
Will, do you think, just quickly, the restaurant side, has an opportunity to essentially partner with and possibly support local schools in their procurement? Is that something that you think is possible?
Well, potentially. I think it's a great high-profile thing to do. We actually started a little cafe in the children's centre, which has a nursery attached. The nursery hasn't opened yet, so I'm a bit worried about when it opens. We're going to have to start coming up with some really affordable organic menus, which is £2 per plate, or I think it's even less, £1.50. But I think it's really good to because these are our future consumers. So you're engaging young people, children, and their parents, and I think it's great to put out these sort of lifelines to link up with the local community, and which is the local economy, and to give. And you only get back what you give.
So if you want to come back.
Just one more thing, which was that obviously the Food for Life Served Here scheme, it was a supplier scheme. That is basically a matchmaking service between the Food for Life institutions and suppliers. So I can pick that with you afterwards. And just one more point was that also, if you really are struggling to kind of find who to talk to, then sometimes it's worth getting in touch with your local cabinet members, local politicians. We had someone who was kind of responsible for environment, and he was a real champion. He really he created a lot of he opened doors basically. He was really on board with organic, with local sourcing. He really got it, and he made things happen basically. So sometimes it is worth just going to the top, and whether it's your MP or your local politician, sending them a letter, and they will then make sure it gets to the right person in the chain. So
thank you. The gentleman in the blue check, you were next, sir.
Yeah,
Who are you and where?
I'm Kai Lange from the Biodynamic Agricultural College. 20 years ago I lived in Denmark, and that was just when the shift started of public kitchens taking on organic. And the crucial aspect there was that could happen actually, that the cooking schools started to focus on teach canteen staff how to cook with raw ingredients rather than having big tins of peas and pre-peeled potatoes and all that stuff. That's really crucial. You can't just say cook organic, because they don't know. They don't know how to do it, because it's so much more difficult to deal with raw vegetables and how to do the ingredients. That's really, really, really crucial to create cooking schools really programmed with that focus.
That's one.
Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
No, that's one of the key suggestions within the sustainability eating out section of the action points. We have to get staff training from top to bottom, just to empower them, and I think you can do that digitally.
The gentleman in the green.
I was going to say, if we were to use tinned organic chickpeas, it would put our production costs really low.
Yes.
So-far chickpeas. And you're talking literally a fifth or a tenth of what it would otherwise cost.
But it's more work, and
it's
time.
more work. But when you have a system that runs and you've tweaked that system to run efficiently, then it's, but yes,
But we're
you
working
feed
back
both
up
sides of
against
your headache.
a generation of schools which haven't essentially had proper
Yeah.
cooks, so having to
Yeah.
roll back.
So now you're getting pre-cooked couscous that you can buy in 5 kilo
Yes.
packets from your food supply. It's just like, come on, guys.
Like hot bedded potatoes. The gentleman in the green there.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence, from the Organic Research Centre. I just had a question for Sophie, perhaps for the whole panel as well, in terms of the Food for Life programme. Has there been any engagement with this higher education sector in terms of providing food for students at universities around the UK? Because I know that obviously they're likely to be quite an engaged fraternity in terms of looking at sustainable food.
Yeah, definitely. So the Food for Life Served Here award, so basically, I'm assuming people know about that, but if not, it's an award where you get bronze, silver and gold, and you get points for sourcing ethical, organic, locally sourced meals which are healthy and meet kind of school food standards and all the rest of it. And gold is the highest, and you need to have a minimum of 15% of your ingredient spend on organic, and that scheme works with lots of different public sectors. So there's a separate one for schools, for nurseries, for higher education. So universities is the key sector that we work with, and there's actually really strong demand from students. That actually it's been there's a lot of times student unions or students kind of lobbying their catering services to want more sustainable, organic, locally sourced products. So they're actually already really engaged. A lot of our universities anyway.
Did you say 15 or 50?
15% spend on organic.
Only 15%
Gets
gets gold.
That gets
Yes.
gold, yeah.
But they don't buy organic.
So-
Most caterers don't buy organic. But if you're in an institution like Oxford University and you're a chef or in a school, they don't do organic's the last thing on their mind.
Sure.
So you said at the front.
Yes, Andrew Whitley from Scotland the Bread, formerly, also of Bread Matters and ex of the Village Bakery. Just to pick up on the university thing, in Scotland the Bread we are growing more nutritious grains in Scotland, milling them into flour and trying to get that flour out into the community in various ways. One of them is to engage with the Geography and Sustainability Department of St Andrews University, fairly near to where our little mill is, because your point about students lobbying for better food in their canteens is the sort of Trojan horse, if you like, or the snack lifter that we're using to try and reveal the meanings, the sort of deep meanings actually of better grains, both nutritionally, biochemically, microbiologically and politically, as a subject for study at the level of the intellect at the Sustainability and Geography Department, and then as an actual foodstuff that they can lobby for with the catering department and be a kind of assured market, which would give a reassurance to that catering manager that they're actually going to sell some stuff if they buy our flour at a slightly higher price than they might expect to get it from Great Brothers or whatever. The other point I wanted to make, if I may, is that I think it's really important. Steve mentioned that we should be more coherent or joined up about the health messages and benefits of organic. And it seems to me that this applies to quality notions generally, that one of the biggest issues in the so-called externalities of non-organic or reductionist farming, I don't know quite how to call it. I refuse to call it conventional because chemical seems a little challenging, and
Too respectable.
although it is literally true in some respects. But let's call it reductionist because actually it is reductionist in the strict scientific way, in that it aims to reduce diversity at every point. And of course our whole ethos and animus is to increase diversity, particularly the diversity of the paths to reaching ordinary people, citizens. And that's why I'm always found in meetings bellyaching about the Soil Association and other people's insistence on talking so much to supermarkets, as if getting food to supermarkets is the way to reach a lot of people, which in a sort of simplistic short-term way it is, until the supermarket buyer turns off the tap and you have no more market. So what we're doing here is actually a much more significant way of increasing the diversity of supply chains. But my point is that these externalities of things like cleaning up water from pesticide residues and so on are always brought to the fore as one of the costs that we don't pay for in the price of food, resulting in the increased price of of organic food, but actually one of the biggest externalities is the diet-related ill health occasioned by the commodity system producing ultra-processed food being part of the chain which produces the lowest quality food, which is currently all that's available to people on low incomes. And it seems to me that if the organic supply chain simply replaces that, or seeks to replace that through the existing channels, including the existing channels of procurement and public catering, then it's really not changing anything at all. It's simply trying to sort of shoehorn something which has better values at the margins, but is not really going to change anything very much about diet, or indeed really make good on the promise that organic food can help to deal with diet-related conditions. So our project is explicitly measuring the superior mineral and other content of our flours and grains, so that we can go out to everybody, not just individuals who are using the flour, but people who want to use it for baking for other people, to say this bag of flour has a measurably higher density, and that translates into the need to consume fewer slices to get your daily requirements, and that can be spun to some extent as an invitation to eat less but better, which can help with the obesity, which is at the heart of the main diet-related condition, which is costing so much money, and pain, which is type 2 diabetes. So there's a coherent story there, but it does require us to be honest about not going out with and for instance, another of my belly aches when I was at Soil Association Council, certifying white refined flour in large quantities and assuming that you can sort of leave it at that because it's come from an organic agricultural system, without realising that it is one of the key culprits, along with white sugar, which we've known for 40 or 50 years as leading the appalling rise in the rates of obesity and so on.
Yeah.
And
So we're coming back.
David,
Sorry.
come in.
Go on
I
then,
think you want to
David.
respond to that.
Well, I just, yeah, I mean, it's,
Could you say who you are and where you're
okay, David Price from the Sea Cooperative. I think for me, there's a huge sort of cognitive dissonance, is the best term I know, for describing how people feel about things generally. And this idea of having really coherent stories, to me, is the way that you can cut through. I mean, from the Sea Cooperative, I've obviously got my own agenda in terms of seed. I thought it's interesting that, Steve, when you talked about all the statistics for organic gardening, one thing you didn't mention was organic seed.
I know.
Now, organic seed has a whole story behind it. None of you could grow anything or sell anything if it wasn't for seed. Where does seed come from? You know, it's people out there who are producing seed. There's people out there who are producing varieties that produce that seed. When you look at the conventional system, or I prefer your reductionist system, then that seed is not democratic, because effectively 75% is now coming from only 3 corporations. There's no diversity and there's no health. And to me, those 3 things are the things that we need to be talking about.
Yes.
And if you start at the fundamentals, if you start from the point of seed, you've got a way of communicating with people, whether they're growing their own, whether you're selling something in a restaurant, or whether it comes through public procurement.
And Steve, do you want to just come
Yeah, I
back
mean,
to
the
that?
seeds points is really important. The reason it wasn't in the presentation that I gave was the market sector that was looking at was much more around the upshift was around plant sales, and it was around the skill and I really should have mentioned the skill differential between going into a garden centre and buying plants versus going into a garden centre buying a packet of seeds and then raising from seed, and the skill to get to that plant before you get, or the drop-off rate, potentially even people, and it's generally an education and a skill-based system. But the point is, if we get people to start to grow organically from whatever point, whether it is from a plant or from a seed, that's the way that we hook people on. What we can then do is continue their education process forward. I mean, we would want to talk about open pollinated varieties in much more than F1 hybrids and etc. But for what we're talking about here is just start that movement and get people to shift and transition. But you're right, we need to start.
Can I just come back on that? I think the thing is, you talked about it earlier, people in the restaurant trade. As soon as you mention the word organic, it makes people think there's a resistance because of cost or whatever else. If you actually hit the fundamentals and then bring in, basically these are the fundamentals. This is what we need in order to have a food system that is going to feed our grandchildren and grandchildren's grandchildren.
And the cynicism against organic, about like what you're saying, white flour, organic white flour, doesn't really make a difference. A lot of people think organic's actually a bit of a dead end because of
It's been a very clever campaign against organic.
which yes,
Yeah.
The gentleman at the back has waited
Yes.
a long time.
Yes.
You sir.
Forgive us.
Gareth Roberts from Regather in Sheffield. We run a fruit and veg box team. I'm also the coordinator of the Sustainable Food Cities Food Partnership for Sheffield. And it's a question for Sophie about it's really encouraging to hear about fresh range and the dynamic procurement model. We're doing a lot of work around ownership and governance of local food systems. And I was just wondering if there was anything about the examples you were providing, particularly fresh range. I mean, how is it owned, structured legally, its governance, and is there any aspect of that type of engagement around the dynamic procurement model? I'm really interested to hear about it.
So Fresh Range, I believe, is a social enterprise. So they were already operating as a business. It was very new. It was a real startup company. I think they'd been in operation for about a year, collecting fresh produce from local farms in Bath and North East Somerset, Bristol area, and delivering to homes in Bristol and Bath. So that was their kind of core business model. And then we met them through Meet the Buyer event. Actually, we had a local food strategy launch, and in the afternoon we tagged on our Meet the Buyer event for our school food contract, and they were one of the key buyers who came. They are looking in terms of. Are you kind of interested in their model, whether they're looking to expand or
So
to?
our direction has been from the community economic development perspective over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, and it's sometimes called community wealth building, which is quite a strong part of the shadow cabinet economic policy. And so we've looked at various sectors as being useful opportunities to engage in community wealth building, and food came out top. I mean, comparatively to, say, banking or housing or healthcare, there's far fewer barriers to entry and a much more engaging sort of topic that many people can get to grips with. Is much more there on a day-to-day basis. So we see food as an ideal opportunity to demonstrate the community wealth building approach, but it adds another layer of complexity to what is something that's already very complex around food system development and change. But I think it's for us it's been very useful to connect with an economic agenda that gains interest and attention very quickly.
Yeah, well, I think Fresh Range, they do have plans to expand as well. Obviously, they're working with the commercial Crown Court services at the moment. So I could definitely put you two in touch. I mean, whether they'd be, but it'd be great to see what other kind of similar organisations might be able to play that role of Fresh Range in different areas. And I was also Sustainable Food Cities Coordinator for Bath and North East Somerset, and local economy and actually embedding that into the heart of the whole approach was really, really important actually, and I'd be happy to kind of speak afterwards and share.
And question from you.
It's a question. Sorry, I'm Kate McAvoy from Real Seed Capital, but I'm also, that's kind of where my question is coming from. I'm one of the regional coordinators for the Land Workers Alliance in Wales, and we're doing quite a bit of sort of public policy stuff there. And my question is coming back to this issue of the story, particularly it's I think a question for you, and how you're selling things to people. And it seems like we've had 3 different things mentioned here that is almost a triangle. There's organic, there's local, and then there's sort of breed and flavour. And I come from Pembrokeshire, where local is a very, very saleable thing. I go to my local chippy, which is not a fancy local chippy, and it tells me what breed of potatoes it is, who grew them, and what trawler the fish come off. And that's just a really normal chippy. Very good. Now my thought is, in a way, the local and the breed and flavour is quite an easy sell. And certainly as a seed company, we sell on flavour, on open pollinators, and that's a very easy sell. Is it dangerous to go too far that way and too far away from organic? Are we in danger? Because I can tell you that my chippy ain't selling you organic potatoes. It is sustainable fish, interestingly. They're very big on sustainable fish,
Good
and people
question.
understand that. And it's what you're saying about simple messages. Are we in danger of almost going for the too simple messages? I don't know. And it's
No, it's
because
a really
I think
good
whole
question.
social media, we find Instagram very useful.
Really good
It's
question.
really good, but it's very easy to oversimplify.
Jury's out. Anybody got
Well,
any views?
Will, how do your customers, do you think, respond to that triangle?
I think generally in England we're quite disconnected to where our food comes from compared to like your average Italian in Italy or Spanish person, white person in there.
Or Pembrokeshire person, actually.
Yeah, so exactly. So we're quite disconnected. So even saying this is this variety of potato, we're like, well, that's interesting. You know, I didn't know that you know, King Edward's. So I think that this is, and as you say, it's not necessarily organic, but it's educating people about where their food comes from, bring it into their conscious awareness rather than just ordering food without any thought as to where it's come from. And it's saying that it's local food.
Oh yeah, it's
Well, that's really
Pembrokeshire potatoes grown by farmer X, variety Y.
yeah. Because it's difficult to, it's probably easier to get the local produce than it is to get it from the food service wholesaler, which is great. I mean, that's actually a great advantage of being in a sort of,
Although you do raise, of course, a very interesting point about the use of the word organic.
Yeah.
And I think what's quite interesting is if you look in the way in which DEFRA is dealing with post-Brexit
Yes.
policy, the word organic is, I suspect there's actually a name change on their software which removes the word organic automatically and replaces it with something else. And indeed, in the RSA Commission's interim report, the word organic is not mentioned at all. Now, they talk about approaches, agroecological approaches. They name check a lot of organic practice. The actual word organic does not appear.
And my concern,
Wow.
It
my
looks
concern
like
is if
wow,
you
there's-
think you've solved the problem once they've done local and knowing it, do they think they've solved the problem without going to organic?
It's a good. I think it's a question for debate. But Margie, could you
Yeah,
say who
so-
you are and where you're from?
So I'm Margie Leonardson, and I've worked for many years for Garden Organic. I work these days on behalf of Garden Organic, but also Coventry University. So I wanted to pick up on this. I don't know quite know where to start. It was, I suppose, following on more from Steve's talk. In fact, it is relation to this what we can call organic. I mean, I really do think there is a massive opportunity to engage with people within the organic movement, for the organic movement to reach out is through gardening and through engaging people in that way. Now, we have now sort of ended up with a situation where, as an individual gardener, I can garden organically and I can do so and be proud of it. But we have a problem when we come to community gardening, in that it's of course not certified organic gardening, and therefore they are not being able to trade in their produce, to share their produce, to celebrate their produce as part of being a part of the organic movement. They're not, in my view, being able to be proud of being organic. And so I'm sort of wondering, what do we need to do? And I think that's a great shame, because we have to remember that community gardening, urban gardening, will not necessarily be organic by default. We have a massive growth in, for example, vertical growing systems, which may be the future for the way we go the way we grow food in the cities in the future. So how do we make sure, and how do we welcome organic gardeners to be part of the organic movement and be able to say that they are part of it? They can obviously be part of it, but if they can't be proud of their produce as organic, and obviously this comes back to certification, it comes back to some technical issues, and I'm sure you all know that my hobby horse for years has been that we cannot grow organically in containers, which is, I think, something that we really have to develop. We have to be innovative. We have to develop the organic sort of techniques so that it can encompass that, because that is how it's going to happen in the urban areas. So that's what I wanted to
That's one for Garden Organic to lead on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it raises a really interesting question around supply chains and everything else.
Yeah.
You know, you can have some really good urban growing situations, but they meet the fresh, they meet the local, they meet the variety changes and differences, but then they come up the barrier that they can't be all three sides of the triangle that you were talking about, Kate. So I think that's a real issue. I think there's always a gap, and there's a line drawn around certification, and rightly so. We want to protect the organic movement and make sure that it's there. But I think there's a real open debate now to look at what happens on below that line and how can people come up to a thing. We've got new European legislation coming in around organic. Whether we adopt it, whether we don't, we will find out probably in the coming days, weeks, months, years potentially. But you know, they're making inroads in Europe around this, and that's something that, you know, local kind of schemes where you can self-cert, or you can look at how in a consortium of growers they can regulate and self-regulate. So, you know, maybe that's a way forward, but I think we still need to protect the upper echelon, the larger commercial produce, but we also need to service the lower end, and I'm guessing from Will's perspective as well, having a broad plethora of people who grow that you can draw down upon means that you can really get down to that reducing food miles. You can offer that fresh, that local, possibly fill hungry gaps as well, because people are using different systems and different techniques to be able to do it.
It's something that certainly Garden Organic is very aware of, that there is a tranche essentially of growers who are essentially isolated because they are unable or unwilling to be certified, and in many cases it's not appropriate for them to be certified. And for example, if we, as Margie said, if we start excluding everyone who is growing according to good organic practice in containers, then we're getting rid of a vast opportunity, particularly for generation rent and for people who are in places, are living in places where there is very little open ground for them to actually grow actively. We need to encourage and support them to do the best they can, and in many cases that is container growing, and we need to make sure we're not excluding them simply because they're not able to comply with the certification process, which is designed for farms. And that's something that we acknowledge and we need to do. But as Steve says, one of the issues at the moment is, as we're probably half as looking at our phones, is wondering what's going to be happening about our government and what regulation will look like post-Brexit, because that's what Lynda and I are doing a lot of work on with DEFRA, and the difficulty essentially. The last time I think we were at a meeting when the minister came in, we asked him about what he felt was likely to be essentially the process and where we were going to be post-Brexit. He's going to put his head in his hands on the table, and I suspect that's what Mrs May is doing right now. So essentially we need to be careful that we don't run before we actually know what the post-Brexit environment will be. But when we do know that, I think going into some sort of a scheme, and not self-certification but possibly self-regulation of some sort, is where we will need to be going. Do we have any more questions? We've got a few more minutes, I think. Yes, I've got one at the back there. Yes? Could you say who you are?
Rebecca from Landworkers Alliance.
Thank you.
I was just thinking, well, I've got 2 points really. First was on this organic and excluding or including people, and the increasing use of concept of agroecology in England, which has been around globally for certainly at least 20 years, certainly as long as I'm involved in this. And in a way, it can be used as a slightly convenient fudge about this issue around certification, I think. But I was thinking that sounds quite negative. But one of the things I think of with agroecology that extends it beyond organic is that it does include people so much more, and a diversity of supply chains. And I think actually, in a way, using agroecology isn't a bad fudge. It's actually quite a convenient way of bridging between the official, legally defined term organic and where we're trying to get to. And then the other point was, it came up earlier, I went to the film last night about Sikkim in India becoming 100% organic. And we were talking a bit about what could be transferred from Sikkim to the UK, what lessons could be transferred. And it's been interesting sitting in this session today because 3 of the preconditions are very much being talked about. There's the education of consumers, right from children, so that they're really learning why eating organic and not eating non-organic produce is a really good thing to do. And then training of people so they've got capacity to actually grow in an organic way. But then I think you mentioned, Sophie, what a game changer it was when a politician at quite a high level made that political will and made a decision and started opening doors for you. And I think we're well on our way to that, and it's quite exciting to see how things are joining together. But it took them 13 years from when they decided to go to being 100% organic to actually achieving it. And so I think that we're definitely on the right tracks with all the different elements that we're talking about. So probably more of the same is good.
Yeah.
Sophie, do you want to respond to that?
And then may I ask a question?
Sophie, do you want to respond to that? Or?
Yeah, well, I think, exactly that. Yeah, well, I haven't actually seen the film. I couldn't make it last night, but I'd love to see that. And right, okay, that sounds good. But yeah, absolutely. And I think having political will and that's really key. I think so. And I think to get that, there is also that piece around there has to be those kind of influential people in place to actually win over hearts and minds, and to do that education way sometimes of the politicians. Sometimes you have people who'll be really already engaged and aware, but that was something, we used to have regular briefings with our politicians on kind of sustainability briefings, and food was just something that at the time when I was in post that they just really kind of hooked onto. And I think that's because food is just such a it's such an engaging topic, isn't it? Everyone engages with food, and we also do engage with something like energy, but it's just, we eat food, it's enjoyable, we have 3 meals a day, it's so much more an engaging topic, but yeah.
Linda, you wanted to...
Well, it's just that every time in this section you see education or engagement or empowerment, we really do mean from top to bottom. It has to be that way. You have to start with the children and you have to go up to the MPs. You have to do the retail sector, you have to do the catering sector, you have to do absolutely everything in between. And in a sense, for me, that's where this, because we have a century which has to address and overcome the issues of sustainability, and I'm sure like local and like agroecological, the word sustainable will be used to mean all kinds of things, but basically we've got a hell of a lot to overcome this century because of what we're doing to the planet. So therefore, wrapping up from top to bottom, positive advocacy, getting hold of people like Hugh Fearnley-Whittenstall and Jamie Oliver have actually done a hell of a lot to begin to change the culture in terms of how we value food, or what we should or we shouldn't be doing, but what we actually want to do, etc., etc. So the sustainability hook and the engagement, empowerment hook from top to bottom, I really do think is critical. And I hope that that is what I'm sensing from the people here. Would that be fair to say that?
I think we have time for just probably a couple of quick questions.
Yes.
Questions. Firstly, I want to...
Sorry, could you just say who you are?
Sorry, I'm Samantha Mullender from the Organic Research Centre. I was wondering, Sophie, if you could elaborate a bit on the dynamic procurement, so how you're ensuring that the supply is meeting the demand, or vice versa, how you're making sure that the demand is there for the supply you're being promised when you've got people committing for short-term contracts here and there and you're making up the area. And then more generally, going back to the point that was raised about health, we've heard a few times how there's almost this expectation we get everyone to exchange to organic. We solve the problem of obesity, we solve the problem of type 2 diabetes, and I don't dispute for 1 second that if you took a menu, any menu in a fast food chain restaurant, you swapped all your ingredients straight over to organic, yes, you avoid a lot of the toxins, but if everyone had organic burgers and organic chips, it's not going to solve anything. So I was wondering if your Food for Life in your restaurant menus, whether that kind of organic and health is something that you're looking at from a plate perspective when you're going in.
Yes. That's absolutely what we're including. Yeah.
So maybe starting the health thing first of all, absolutely. So I think when the food strategy and everything that we were doing with Bath and North East Somerset and that we do through Food for Life is around taking that balance. That balance, I suppose, to quality, and it has to be healthy food that meets the school food plan, and there's really strict guidance around the health criteria within that, and also for other settings that is like healthy balanced meals. Again, and locally sourced and organic, so that's kind of how that's broken down. Also, through procurement, there is a thing called the food procurement public sector. public plan for procurement, and sort of call it the Bondfield plan. But the main thing that came out of that is that they had a balanced scorecard where you had cost balanced against quality, and they divvied up the quality into 5 areas, which something like health and well-being, resource efficiency, there was something about inclusion of SMEs, etc. I can't remember all off the top of my head, but it had all those sectors, and that is what we use when doing our procurement, and what national government advise all public sector food procurement to follow. It's voluntary, so you don't have to follow it at the moment, but it's a way then of kind of actually kind of quantifying and appropriately balancing. Say you might have 60%, 40% cost, 60% quality, and then that, what is quality? And actually there's real strong guidelines there on how to score and assess quality. So that's something that we implemented. And in terms of dynamic food procurement, the way it worked is basically wholesalers and smaller growers were all part of the system at the same time, which was that was the way in which you get around kind of having, you know, the hungry gap and things like that, and, you know, people maybe not having the availability or volumes of supply for the 8,000 meals needed every single day. And cooks could select from various different producers and growers who they wanted to work with. We also ran mini competitions. I think that was around every other month or something, where it might be, say, vegetables, and all the growers and suppliers can submit their prices, and then the cooks can then select from that. So they all kind of put their prices on the table. The cook can say, right, I want to source from Farrington's, or I want to source from another supplier or grower. So I can talk to you a little bit more in depth about that.
Thanks very much, Sophie. I think we're sadly going to have to draw to a close because we're at our time. Before Lynda makes some closing remarks, could I just say to any of you who are